Hello there, my name is Yorkie and welcome to the channel for a video that is a little bit different to my usual content that I put up on the channel, where we are today going to be taking a look at a defensive maneuver that another driver pulled off on me on a previous video and discussing whether the maneuver that he actually pulled off was legal or not. So, as you can see, we're at Bathurst in the GT4 cars, and I've been hunting the car down over the course of the past few laps, and I've tried to make a couple of overtaking manoeuvres already. This has been by far my best opportunity as we get in the slipstream coming down Conrad Straight, and you can already see that he's really trying to squeeze me over to the left-hand side of the circuit to try and make it difficult for me here coming into the chase. As I didn't draw up far enough alongside, I thought I'd slot him behind coming through the corner. He runs a little bit deep, which gives me an opportunity on the exit, so I move to try to go to his outside. As he squeezed me over to the right, I then switch over to the left, and then he moves across and pinches me here at the apex. And that pinch maneuver there is what we're going to discuss in this video and talk about whether it was legal, right on the limit, or an illegal defensive maneuver, and give you guys an opportunity to voice your opinions down in the comment section below. So loading into the game then, we'll take a look at this from a number of different angles and perspectives. This is the trackside cameras, good way of showing off the action in kind of a TV style, and you can see getting squeezed over onto the grass there. He hasn't quite left me a car's width as we come into the chase, and then as we come through in the braking zone, goes a little bit deep. I wasn't quite so hooked up on the apex as much as I would have liked to have been, but there's the run off the corner that I had anyway, and then we switch over to the other side and try and nip down the inside. You can see there's just the slightest of overlaps there as we came in before he then ended up pinching me. So if we go back and take a look from another angle with the helicam, we'll get a bit more of a vertical view, taking a look at this just to see how close things did get. Quite low down at the moment, but there we go, the camera now rises up as we come into the braking zone here. No overlap there, and he leaves the room on the inside. I just decided to slot him behind because I didn't have the run on him going through the left-handed kink. It's in and around here that obviously all the action unfolds that we want to be looking at, and this is me trying to nip down the inside, and there's just the slightest of overlaps there just before we got into the apex. So let's take a look from on board on the bonnet cam, and let's slow it down a little bit as well. So we've got the better run coming off the corner here, and we know that the final corner is going to be a reasonable overtaking opportunity. We just need to obviously make sure that we get the run, draw up alongside the car in front, and try and make the move under braking, whether it's going around the outside or whether it's going down the inside. All very much depends on what the car does in front and which side he chooses to go and defend. So playing at 0.25 speed, you can see that I'm closing up on the back of the Mercedes quite substantially. And at this point, obviously, we're over towards the left-hand side of the circuit on the natural racing line. So my only real option at this stage is to go over to the right-hand side of the circuit to try and make the move around the outside into the approaching corner. So that's exactly what I do. I shift over to the right-hand side. He follows me across, which is the natural racing line anyway. And at this point, there is no overlap between myself and the Mercedes in front. At this stage here, as we're starting to come in towards the braking zone, I can see that the way that he is pointing the car and the last couple hundred meters that we have just travelled, that he is slowly veering over to the right hand side, and I'm going to run out of room if I try to squeeze around the outside here. What will most likely happen is that I'll try and squeeze past, get forced onto the grass, end up locking up a wheel and going straight on, going too deep into the corner, into the gravel, potentially even into the barrier if, for instance, there is contact between myself and the Mercedes, or I just catch the grass really unluckily and find a bump there that basically reduces any sort of braking performance. So at this stage my mind is now switching to we need to be on the inside or to back out of this move completely. But we've still got a relatively good run. I don't want to back out the move as of yet, so my choice was to switch to the inside. So that's exactly what I do. Knew that I didn't quite have an overlap at that stage, so I switched to the inside And at this point here, we haven't quite reached the braking zone yet. We're very, very close. But he obviously sees this in his rearview mirror and also acts accordingly and goes to make his defensive maneuver. Now, this is one of the things that one or two people did pick up on in the actual video that I ended up putting of the entire race. A couple of people said they actually moved in the braking zone, but we're not in the braking zone yet, and he has made his maneuver. It's not amazingly obvious, but he has made his defensive maneuver to basically change his direction. That one move that you're allowed to do, that one change of direction, he has made it at this point just before we come into the braking zone here. So this isn't his defensive maneuver, him kind of coming across. That's just, he was there taking the natural racing line and he's been following the natural racing line. He hasn't moved defensively as of yet. He's just kind of zoning me to the outside here at this point. I then switch across. He sees that, reacts immediately, also switches across, and then we're on the brakes. It's at this point here, obviously, I realise that we're both hard on the brakes, and I can see that he is painting a line drawing straight at the apex of the corner, and I am being forced into a pinch here at the apex. So I know at this point, even though I've kind of committed to the inside, I need to do everything that I can in order to back out. What he's doing is basically a Senna-like defensive maneuver where he's putting all the ownership on the other driver to avoid making contact. Really, really aggressive, hard defending, and yes, it does work, but you need to make this kind of maneuver on someone that you can trust if you're going to make this kind of defensive maneuver. It's very, very easy for this to go wrong. It's very easy for the person trying to make the overtake to commit a little bit too hard and too aggressively for them to then back out if you then try and force them into this kind of situation. So obviously here, under braking, I can see that gap is diminishing, it's diminishing, it's diminishing. There's the slightest of overlaps here, but it's not enough of an overlap to warrant me the room. And then obviously, we're now basically here at the apex. There is probably a foot or so between his inside wheel and that inside curb. There is no room for a BMW M4 to be on the inside here, so I'm forced to back out of this maneuver. Obviously, like I said, recognised that basically as soon as we got into the braking zone, recognised very early on that he's drawing a straight line in towards the apex, and I am basically, it's all on me to back out. So at this point, I am still hard on the brakes. He's obviously still on the brakes as well, but he'll be easing off because he's been turning into the corner a little bit. So whilst he is still doing some braking, he's not doing anywhere near as much as I am, because I'm still very hard on the brakes, trying to slow the car down, trying to avoid making contact. Unfortunately, we managed to get ourselves slowed down enough that he clears, or we clear his car, and he slips in across in front. So we'll take a look at this one last time just to show you how close we really got there at the apex, and for that we're going to look at it from the perspective of a bird's eye view. So obviously we've got the better run. You can see we're closing up here. I wonder if we actually do make contact coming off the exit of the corner. Possibly might have been a slightest of bumps there, but yeah, as he was coming off the turn, he took the racing line. I've moved over to the right hand side, he's moved over to the right hand side slightly and gently guiding himself over to basically shut that door. You can see just as I move over, in fact, went a little bit too far backwards there. You can see basically at this point there is still a car width there on the right hand side, but it's now getting to the point where it's going to be extremely tight and there's not really any room for me other than, you know, dipping the wheel onto the grass. So that's when I switch across over to the left hand side. He recognises that, changes his direction, his defensive maneuver, and then he is onto the brakes and we are both onto the brakes. See her closing up. Need to adjust my line slightly there to avoid contact. Tiniest of overlaps. And there may have been the tiniest of touches there, but it was extremely close, as you can see, to being contact and him going round. Just play this back one more time at full racing speed, just so you can see the events unfolding. So he's taken his usual racing line there. May have been the slightest of bumps, but it was almost negligible. And we're onto the brakes. And the tightest of squeezes there at the apex. So, in my eyes, being the recipient of... in my eyes, being the recipient of that... In my eyes, being the recipient of that defensive pinch, I think it is very, very hard defensive driving. I think it's very, very aggressive and quite Senna-esque in the sense that it's kind of putting the ownership on the other driver to avoid making contact with that defensive maneuver. But for me, it was legal. He didn't move multiple times in the braking zone. He only made one defensive maneuver. And whilst, yes, I end up getting pinched at the apex and obviously losing the momentum and therefore the overtaking opportunity there at that stage, I do think it is legal. But I'd like to hear what you guys think, so post your comments down in the comments section below. If you haven't seen the full race video as of yet, a link to that will be down in the description below. It is well worth watching because it was a fantastic battle that I had with this other driver, which lasted a good number of laps, but I won't spoil the result for you. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, consider subscribing if you haven't already. But otherwise, thanks very much for watching. Hopefully I shall catch you in the next one. Until then, have fun, stay safe, and take care.